Well, I mean, we feed back the data on a regular basis, saying, do you realize there's nobody here, or there's loads of people here, and, why are they here, and, why don't you do this and do that? And there's been a kind of ongoing sort of response. But I think what I'm going to be talking about today is already published, and I'm only going to, in a sense, do a promo about this. So you can go to our cyber research site and actually see the report, which is, in a sense, a consolidation of what we've done, although largely in the mobile field, as I'll tell you why we chose mobiles to illustrate really how Europeana's gone. I mean, this morning, yesterday, and so on.
I think it's ready,
okay,
so
okay.
If you don't want to tell your whole presentation in 3 seconds without slides.
I mean, there's a small audience, so I mean, you might as well be informal. You can read all the detail and stuff. It's just there. It's a better format. But I think we need to engage about this because,
Your time starts now, by the way.
Okay, time starts now. Okay, I don't mind. You can cut me off any time, basically speaking. But, this yesterday, there were 200 people in the audience. This is a tech conference. We're not techs. We're behavioral people fundamentally. We want to understand how people move around in the virtual space, what they get out of that, what are the degrees of satisfaction, and so on. So you've got 200 people, all top of their trade, creating fantastic kits. We've seen some of this today and all the rest of it. But the bottom line is, does anybody buy it? Does anybody use it? What does it actually look like when all you guys put your stuff together and curate this kind of thing in the virtual space, yeah? And the only way you can find out is actually go into the virtual space and see what's going on, because you haven't got a clue. And the danger is always that we take the paradigm of behavior that we've long got accustomed to by observing people in libraries and museums and all of that, and we take all this baggage to how people behave in the virtual world. And guess what? They don't behave anything like that at all. In fact, the shock is that, in fact, they behave like this at all. And at one time, we did an iconic report called the Google Generation, which was what happens when people behave like kids behave with their kit, become doctors, go into the world, what will actually happen. And in fact, what we found out that was we were all the Google generation, and that we'd all got those behavioral patterns that we thought kids had. Yeah? And the next step, of course, is the next paradigm shift, if I can use it, although I see we're sort of restricted on the use. But I think it is mobile behavior, because the mobile is going to be the platform of choice in about 2 years' time. It is already for whole groups of people. So most of the kit, most of the websites have been designed for PCs, laptops in office environments. Yeah? As you'll see from the report, that people use mobiles at home, in social spaces, in the evening, not during the day, and they, again, behave very differently. So if you haven't caught up already to how people behave in the virtual space from the Google generation, you're going to be in for a big shock, because, in fact, we've got another step change in behavior. And to sum it all up, without all the figures and all the rest of it, is that people search horizontally, not vertically. They don't hang around, and they don't want to hang around. They have so much choice, they have so much variety, they multitask all the time, they bounce the terrain. Yeah? And when I hear people talk about stickiness, how to keep people in a site, and all of that nonsense about browsing and searching, it is absolute rubbish. And people are still pounding it out because they have not seen how these people behave. These people behave just as I behave when I go into Vienna Airport and I go into anywhere. The success of the airport is how quickly I can get through it. Yeah? For all of these people, we've looked at 3 million people over the last 2 years, users of Europeana, yeah? They're all like me. They're all like you. Yeah? They don't spend any amount of time on anything for very long. Now, in the Google generation study, there was this sense that this was a dumbing down in information seeking. Yeah? That this actually, and I always give the example of my daughter, and I'll do it again because it really brings it. When we looked at the logs, because all of our data is based upon log analysis, yeah? But done with an information-seeking model to understand how people move around this space. And when David and Ian looked at the logs and they saw the logs, we thought, well, nobody is hanging around. In fact, we got this group, this huge group of people that come into Europeana. We call one shot. They come in once and go out and never come back again. 41%, something like that. A huge amount of people just come in and don't come out again. Well, we couldn't understand this because this is not what systems designers tell us. This is not what museums do. They accumulate, they create new websites and all these things to try and get the user to hang around, yeah? You know, all these things. Anyway, my daughter was in the other room watching the TV. She had a remote in her hand, and she was flicking from channel to channel to channel to channel. And I was irritated because I thought that David and Ian had messed up the methods. No one had told me that nobody hangs around, that everybody goes like that. Because we got a model that to read a whole book is good for us. It's like eating all of our meal, isn't it? But this is a crazy model because we're in the fast food world. We're also in the fast information world, and what we see is fast information consumption. Anyway, back to my daughter, and to the big question, is this dumbing down? Is this what we want? Are we actually making our systems easier, better for people to behave like that? Or are we making our systems a form of chastisement that says, no, this is not the way to behave with culture? You know, we ponder it, we read it, and all of those kinds of things. The definition of reading has completely gone. What was it before? Reading a whole book. Huh? Anyway, Victoria, flick, 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 flick. I get irritated, I say to her, Victoria, can't you make up your mind what you're watching? And she says, Dad, I'm watching it all. And that's what they're all doing. When someone's in Europeana, they're also in the BA site, booking their site. They're twittering. They're doing all of those kinds of things. Nobody does any single thing for a long period of time anymore. And that is what you see in those logs. Absolutely massive. So go and have a look at the detail, and I'll just flick through some of those important slides that we've seen. But basically speaking, the message about the mobile user who's on the road with the iPad and all of those kinds of things is that they have an even more abbreviated thing, yeah? A form of behavior than the PC people who we thought were really, really quick. This is absolutely amazing, the way that people move and the speed with which they move. So let's have a look. Okay, well, we're sad people. We're voyeurs. While you've been doing all this hard work and people have been consuming, we've been watching what has been going on in Europeana. You threw a tiny pebble, you don't think it's a tiny pebble, but it is, in a pond called the web. Yeah? And we've been monitoring all of the time on what has actually happened as a result of that. Now, what you've been doing, of course, is you've been moving as we go. So we're constantly having to reassess what we're saying because, in fact, you've introduced something we said was a good idea, and so on and so on and so on. So all the time, this site is moving. And what we've done at the end of the report, and I think this is really important, otherwise we just lose grip. You introduce something, does it work? Does it bring in more people? Is it less or whatever else? We've introduced what I really like is dashboards. You know, they do it in the Financial Times, the Times. It's fantastic. You know, heads up, you know, okay, let's take the pulse points of Europeana in terms of speed of access, depth of searching, number of queries, whatever you like, time in there, and put them up there, yeah? And then next year, put up the same things. Has it actually increased? Has it done anything? Because otherwise, as somebody says, we're in the mire with the data. We haven't got a clue whether we're introducing something that is good or bad. And how do we judge whether it's good or bad? It has to be the user, surely. Yeah. Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to change the way people access this kind of information. So, dashboards, we need to take the pulse of the patient, which is Europeana, and that's what we've been doing regularly, but we need to institute some heads-up things so that when people talk, particularly to keep systems people in their place and to keep them in a context, which is the kind of user context. So that is really, really very important that we do those kinds of things. And as you'll see, you'll also see dashboards in this report which show fixed users, laptop users, work in the office, PC users, compared to mobile users, yeah? And we also, because, all mobiles are not the same. Smartphones, tablets, and yes, the behavioral patterns, the BlackBerry. We can look and see the different performance. And Europeana is already changing. It's producing an interface for tablets now, and we'll be able to see it. Because you could argue that the mobile user actually gets an information light experience of Europeana because it doesn't get the whole functionality. So say now, as we're forecasting, is that, maybe in 4 or 5 years' time, they will be the majority of users, right? Well, surely the tail should wag the dog. That something was designed for something else when everybody else is using this, that in fact there should be something that actually, and it's already happening, so that the mobile platform actually becomes a definitive platform. Yeah? But if that is the case, and iPad probably excluded, is that in fact most users are going to get less in terms of functions, uses, and so on, than they get now, which is true. Yeah? Now, are we just giving in to that type of behavior and saying, well, yeah, that's fine. What can we do about this? This is just absolutely it, that we become a really, really minimalistic thing in which we just allow people to get that wonderful content that they like. Yeah? I think I'd also point to some other things that we've found in this study is that, and I'm always a great believer, is the differences between countries and users and platforms. And some of them are behaving like you would like everybody to behave, as a parent, say, as a sort of European parent. And the French just seem to be taking this system in the mobile platform, in the fixed platform, in terms of the content, in terms of the usage, in terms of everything. The French are flying. Account for 25% of all mobile traffic into Europeana. 25%, one nation. Why? Okay, we can allow for the fact of how much content there is, but even when we take those things out, there is still something there. So, what is it about the French and not about the Brits? What it is about these sort of things, these equalizers and so on. So there are absolutely some fantastic differences, which I think should point us to big questions. And in fact, the logs, although the data is fantastic because it is not what people say they would do. And we know from all the research we do, nobody remembers what they do in cyberspace. You don't, I don't, because you're doing 5, 6 things at the time. It's all completely seamless. If I asked you the next day, did you search this? Look, you forget it. No, you'll get no accurate data. But every time somebody lands in Europeana, they leave a digital footprint. We can make that digital footprint into user information, which actually converts activity into behavior, and then we can look at behavior, and then we can turn that out into outcomes, yeah? So someone was talking yesterday, I don't know who it was. Was it Max? No. Someone was talking about we need satisfaction metrics because use itself is no longer very useful because everybody has large amounts of use. And you have millions of use now. You don't have to worry about it at the moment. You let Google in to deep dive into your indexing. Uses just went, and you'll see a graph, it just went through the roof. Yeah? You probably have 5.5 million users next year. Yeah? Not bad. And with the growth of mobiles and all the rest of it, it's just going to go like that. So I think it's like, I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm doing an end-of-term report because I am, because I'm doing an end-of report on terms of all the 3 million people that have used you and left, marks and stuff like that. And basically, it's a great success story. I mean, that is wonderful. And the interesting things that what makes success, and Google deep diving, and no doubt Wikipedia, and all the rest. And you can already see the traffic coming from blogs, and you can see the traffic coming in from Twitter, and all the rest of it. You can see the whole thing. But it's a churn. There's so much happening in this kind of pool. There's lots and lots of waves that we need to make sense of. Why are mobiles interesting? Because this report, although right throughout this report, we compare it with fixed users, because we need to do that, because I still think we have that paradigm in our heads and forgetting what it is like. Yeah? The big users of Europeana by mobile phone are Mac users. Yeah? Mac, iPads, Mac. Smartphones account for 70% of all the traffic. I see all the Macs here. You see, I mean, there's something about European Macs. They're both cool, Jill. You'll have to sort of get something out of this. And I don't know about Google. Nobody's sure about Google. But, there's clearly 3 really important players. Europeana, Macs, and Google. Yeah? And they're circling around in this big pond. So the thing about the mobile report, which, as I say, is available now, you can get it, look at it, is that it's a nice way of looking at a particular community, mobile users who are going to grow, see how they behave. But we'll be producing the same visualization for all the users, at the end of this month, I guess. That's when that is there. Let's have a look. Just some of these things. Here's search engine optimization, which is just letting Google crawl. Not only did it bring in vast more numbers of people, it brought in different people. And most of these people went round the homepage. They went straight into content. And guess what? Mobile users do that even more. Straight content. Avoid the home page. Now, what does that mean? That's my greeting page. That's where all that stuff is. But these people intent on getting through the thing are just avoiding the page. Because they're allowed to go deep, fast, quick, and all the rest of it. Here's the picture of, we're categorizing users. We're beginning to do cluster analysis to see that, and we're going down further track. But it's useful to think in terms of these one-shots, normal users, mobile users. There's 69,000 of them who we think over the last few months. And then heavy users, which are the industrial, big museums and all the rest of it. Although there's a small number of them, they actually account for quite a high percentage of all the use. Here's a great example of looking at this bouncing behavior where people go in and out. Let's take the normal user group, typical users, yourselves, and all the rest of it. 37% only look at one page. That fits with every other analysis we've done on health services and all the rest of it. You're talking about at least 1/3 of people in and out. So what's all this talk about browsing? What's all this talk about these people just... Now, what we don't know, and what hopefully we will know, is what does that mean? Does that mean failure? Does that mean they don't like it? Or are they just a happy bunny that's got straight to what they want and then come out of the system? Because there's so many of them, we have to look at this particular group of people before we say success or failure. Or what do we do with these people? Here's a growth figure for the different types of mobile phone, iPad, iPhone, Android, Opera, BlackBerry, and so on. And you can see that there's an awful lot of growth coming from the iPhone. Here's the French, right at the top there. And then the Americans next, in terms of the percentage of mobile use. So you've got the Yanks coming in. You can see the various percentages of the market, the iPad, the iPhone, others, Android, and all the rest of it. And we're obviously going to look at each of these as individual groups to see if different behavioral patterns are coming out of this. The most popular destinations for Europeana users are French sites. Rank positions 1, 3, 4, and 5. And these top 10 collections represent a little under 3% of all collections, serve up half of all the page views. Why? What is the reason? This is what we need to know. These are the questions that need to be driven into focus groups and to other forms. We now know the questions we need to ask. We didn't before. We didn't even know what question to ask. We now know the questions. I like this one. Mobile users, fixed users clearly use their devices to search Europeana at very different times. And I like the one on the right, time of the day. Mobile use of Europeana peaks around about 23 hours. You know, when I'm long in bed, going away, and all these cool iMacs and iPhone people are whacking it. You know, so it's good. You know, extending your sort of coverage, and you can see that weekends are also peaks. As you'd expect, there's a shift. There's a shift, a persona shift. We need to look about this. But we have some really good data now to show us what's happening. Yeah, this is interesting, is that, okay, we know that the vast amount of traffic that comes in via search engines, and we can accept that, and perhaps we need now to focus down to the social media and the other forms in which people come in. But you can see that according to the referring site, the type of site you come to, you actually arrive on a very different page, so you get a very different experience. Yeah? You can see that, you know, if you come via a search engine, just 18% arrive at the home page, but if you come in via a blog, 90% does. Now this is interesting, you know. We're not quite sure what is it about it, but it raises the question. So another really good question, lots of things for people to. And here are my dashboards. I really like dashboards because I think it gives us a fix. And here's dashboards for, I'll just read them out, duration of visits, seconds. So that's the first one on the left-hand side, fixed, mobile, 75.9 for fixed, 65.2 seconds. And then page visits, time per page, search page views. We've got a grip. Yeah, we've got something that says this is different. And here's one exactly the same, but different types of advice. And it just puts it in front of our eyes that, you know, that the iPad is quite similar in many ways to the behavior that we would expect in a fixed machine. There's our attempt at a satisfaction metric. Well, I think it's pretty good. It's not just an attempt. Any of you familiar with scholarly journals knows that the real success is actually taking the PDF. Yeah? That's the sort of point of consumption. That is a happy trade and all the rest of it. And big deals and all those done are actually done on the basis of that. Yeah? people sell because people... Well, what have we got with Europeana, which is a search engine, or actually is a kind of search engine on top of a search engine, or I don't know how we describe it anymore, but we won't describe it, it's too difficult. But how do we actually... What's the success story? Well, how many people click through to the collections? Yeah, that seems to be a reasonable degree of success. And you can see that, in fact, fixed users have a higher degree of success than the mobile users. And if mobile users are going to be the biggest group, we need to begin to think about why. That is, otherwise we're going to lose that. And not mention this to Jill, but I think we need to do this at the collection level so that the stakeholders who are wondering why they're filling all these rights agreements and all the rest of it get an understanding of the amount of trade that comes to them, or the amount of trade that comes to some of them and not others. And that's the way of getting people. I know the moment they see this particular outfit's getting all this kind of trade, and also the museums often don't know what people like because they're physical musician, exhibitions and so on, and nobody counts how many times somebody. But you can count now. Which things go well? Which are the top 10 in the Austrian National Library? Which are the top 10? Do you know? Nobody knows. And it could vary from country and all the rest of it. So there's fantastic stuff there. So 3 minutes to go. Basically, that all says is that the tail wags the dog. I think mobile are going to actually kick back and actually change all the other platforms because these will be the platforms of choice. And like all good 1960s people, there were 2 bonus tracks, which I'm not going to describe now, and that's why I didn't want to describe it, because so far you've seen relatively flat data, because I don't think you could absorb all of that, but we're now putting data sets together to actually sort of create engagement metrics. Time, number of queries, type of platform, that kind of thing. So, at your leisure, please look at those 2, because we're testing it out now. We're looking at those kinds of things and ensuring that we have outcome metrics, because the accountants are going to ask for it soon. Thank you very much.